Hey, it's Mazzy, and welcome back. This is the impossible video that I made possible. These are my top 10 records of all time. I was sitting around several days ago with some friends. Actually, we were virtually texting each other. We had a group of friends that I've known for a bit, some new and some old friends, and we were talking about maybe we should do videos on our top 10 records. Now, this has been done many times. These are the lists you always put together, your favorite records of all time. Now, it's the impossible video. It's the impossible list to make. Your all-time favorite records, 10 of them. Now, do you just pick a genre? Do you just pick an artist? Those are easier, but the way I figured I had to do it, these are my favorite albums of all times today, this week, this month. I'd say half these records are in the permanent collection of my all-time favorite records, the best records I love, my favorite records, me, the person you're watching right now. Best, maybe that word I need to push aside. So let's remove best from the vocabulary here, and I am inconsistent frequently, and some of these records you'll notice that are not the number one records possibly when I've ranked a particular artist. It's a puzzle. So I have 10 records plus a bonus, because bonuses are a thing here. So 11. Now I'm not going to go in order, but I'm going to start with the bonus record, which could easily be in a top 10 anytime of my favorite records of all time. So here we go. Mazzy's top 10 albums of all time. No jazz records here. There's no soul records here. You know, I'm a child of rock and roll, of pop music, and this list reflects that. It reflects my personal musical wealth. Does that make any sense? That sounds kind of cool. My personal musical wealth. I don't mean in terms of monetary wealth, in terms of musical wealth, the joy of art. I'm getting a little verklempt here doing this video because I didn't have to think hard about this video. This wasn't like, oh my God, no. Of course there are other records I love. Anyway, I digress. Let's start. This is the bonus record, and to me, this is one of America's great pop songwriters of the last century, and that's Randy Newman's 1972 album, Sail Away. This is a perfect album, literally a perfect album. Every song is great. Even if you haven't heard his versions of these songs, you've heard several of the songs. You've heard probably a light children-like song, Simon Smith and the Amazing Dancing Bear. Harry Nilsson did an entire album of Randy Newman songs. Nilsson sings Newman before anyone really knew who Randy Newman was. But what a beautiful song. You have Old Man, not to be confused with what Neil Young sings about. Political Science, probably one of the most sardonic songs about the world we live in, and, you know, on the edge of nuclear annihilation in a very humorous way, if you can joke about nuclear annihilation and wars between continents and countries. Randy Newman's always written about American history, about places, about the South. He is from Los Angeles, from a very famous musical extended family. Spent summers when he was young in New Orleans, so he has that kind of Southern sound, and a lot of his storytelling is about that place and time. And of course, You Can Leave Your Hat On, one of the sexiest songs ever. I love his version, and you probably know the version by Joe Cocker that just nailed it too, but this is the version. Ry Cooder is on several tracks on here who I love. His guitar playing, it's just his bottleneck playing on here is wonderful. And of course, it's a piano-based album with Randy Newman's political satire, sexual satire, just a wonderful album, and definitely one of my all-time favorite albums. Another favorite album of mine is 1985's album by Kate Bush, Hounds of Love. This also is a perfect record, and this is a majestic record. There's so much going on. It's cinematic. This is an epic record. I did a video recently, and one of the songs on here was on that video, an epic song, Running Up That Hill, A Deal with God, that's been sort of revitalized in the last year. But Cloud Busting on here, Mother Stands for Comfort. Every song on here is a perfect artistic creation. This is a record. This is one of those records that is a product of the studio. There's so much going on here. Great vocal harmonizing herself, great musical interlude, just a dramatic piece. Side 2, The Ninth Wave, is an entirely, it's an epic. It's a series, it's a story. Hello Earth is a song about loneliness, about loss, about literally being lost in the middle of the ocean here. It's a near-death experience, but it's a groundbreaking album, and it's a truly emotional record, and it's a perfect record, and it's one of my all-time favorite records. Kate Bush, 1985's Hounds of Love. Sea Change by Beck. This is one of 2 albums. This and Morning Phase are the 2 that have that sort of classical, ambient, surreal soundscape. Orchestration, this is the one where he brings music from Serge Gainsbourg on here, from Melody Nelson, as well as some great orchestration work that his father created, musicianship that his father created. But I think this is one of the most beautiful albums ever. The Golden Age, Paper Tigers is the song with the Serge Gainsbourg segment within that song. Of course, there is a very folky country flavor to it, of Lost Cause, Lonesome Tears, End of the Day, Already Dead. Produced by Nigel Godrich. This album was completed in 2 weeks, and it's an all-time favorite of mine. I can't get enough of this record. I can hear it every day of the week and not tired of it. So this is Beck's Sea Change. Next is The Boatman's Call by Nick Cave. This is another piano-based album. You can see with the piano-based music of Randy Newman and this, how I really gravitate to that. There's a warmness in the piano that you don't get on any other instrument, and it carries over here. You notice that the 3 records of Beck, Randy Newman, and Nick Cave, all these men have this sort of mid to lower vocal range, and not a perfect voice, but there's a tonality in their work that just really tugs at me. And this is one of those records, again, I've talked about it many times. This is such a dark record, a sensual record, a spiritual record, and again, one of my all-time favorite records in my collection, in my top 10, literally. A record I keep going back to, I've gone back to it since 1972, so it's 51 years, and that is St. Dominic's Preview by Van Morrison. There's so much on this record. It's not just a pop song after pop song after pop song. It's made up of a lot of long songs. Of course, it starts out literally with a short, quick, soulful pop songs with Jackie Wilson Said, I'm in Heaven When You Smile. Then it continues with these long, poetic pieces that meander in the best of possible ways. You have Listen to the Lion, St. Dominic's Preview, ending up with Almost Independence Day, that goes on, I think, for something like 14, 15 minutes. It's not as in your face and jazzy as, say, Moondance, or even the folk spirituality of Astral Weeks. Great records too, but this is the one in my top 10 list by Van Morrison. As soon as I got this record, this record just seemed so different to me than any other record at the time, and it's in my top list of my favorite records of all time. With every album I choose here, it seems less than possible. These are my favorite albums of all time. In 1969, an album came out. I remember the day I bought this album. This is The Who's Tommy, in June 1969. Very soon after this album came out, I bought it at Portals to Music in San Francisco, and it was sold to me by Roy Loney from the Flamin' Groovies. Ironically, 8 years later, after this, we would work together at ABC Records. So he was in the band. I did not know of the Flamin' Groovies at the time. I didn't know he was in a band, but I remember buying this record, and he said, "Are you going to go see him?" And I had no idea they were coming. And several weeks later, I saw them. My first time seeing The Who, and my first trip to the Fillmore West, seeing them perform the entire Tommy. You all know Tommy. Just there's so much in this record. It's so expansive. It's so original. It's such a mind trip, and an amazing sort of psychological storytelling of Pete Townsend and the rest of the band. The musicianship all across, from all the instruments, from everyone. The drumming by Keith Moon. It's always amazed me how Keith Moon could look so sloppy when you see him. It looks like he's air drumming, and he sounds so friggin' amazing. The guitars on this, obviously, Pete Townsend. Of course, the vocals of Roger Daltrey, and that bass playing and French horn playing of John Entwistle. 1969's Tommy. The Who Sell Out is amongst my favorite records. And, you know, sometimes there's other albums you might choose at a certain time to listen to. But Tommy is one of the most incredible albums ever made. The sound of this album is great. I know a lot of people, Who fans and rock and roll fans like the anthem rockers and like Who's Next, and that's fine. But in my collection, my taste, my top 10 records of all time, I'm giving a shout out to The Who. Another one which is an obvious choice and is always on top 10 lists by people, and again, amongst my favorite artists, my top 3 artists, literally, and that's the Village Green Preservation Society by the Kinks. This also is a perfect album. This has great pop sensibilities. This has great simple stories of suburban life in North London of Ray Davies. Remember, there was a time when the Kinks got banned from playing. I think it was 3 years or so, 3+ years. They couldn't play in America. And so he was writing inward, writing of places he knows about, opening up with Village Green Preservation Society, the great hit Picture Book, which is really literally a snapshot of everyday life. Animal Farm, obviously the name coming from the George Orwell book. Phenomenal Cat, just every song on here. Big Sky. There is an expanse to this record too, even though it's at the inner things of London and a small little area. There's an expanse within that. Like he's, in a way, Ray Davies is making the entire world this area in northern London. And he would do that for a while, even through Muswell Hillbillies, when they went to RCA Records. But people taking pictures of each other. The Kinks, Village Green Society, a perfect album. I also love Arthur, that came out right after this, and that is an album I pull frequently from my Kinks collection. But the Kinks are the Village Green Preservation Society is one of my top 10 albums of all time. That other band that's up there in my life are the Byrds, and Fifth Dimension is my favorite Byrds album. Now, you could do a back-to-back thing of Fifth Dimension and Younger Than Yesterday, those back-to-back albums in 1966 and 1967, could be mirror images of each other, an extension. It could be a great double album. Very much like Revolver and Rubber Soul are two albums. Not that they're interchangeable, but there's so much great music in either album. Depending on your mood, you could pull any of those albums. I just love the opening. There's a dirge-like quality and a raga-like drone quality with a beautiful Roger McGuinn vocal on Fifth Dimension. Van Dyke Parks appears on that song, but it's just 5D opens this record up. It just gives me chills every time I hear that. It's a short song, 2 minutes and 32 seconds, and it's a song I want to play over and over and over again. It's almost too short, but you know that old showbiz adage, leave the audience wanting more. It doesn't have to be longer, but it's so beautiful. There's a lot of folk rock psychedelia in here. We get into Wild Mountain Time. Mr. Spaceman's probably the novelty song on here, but it's still a wonderful kind of country-like song of its time. I see you, what's happening, I come and stand at every door. But of course, it opens side two with it, which may be and is credited as being the first psychedelic single ever in 8 Miles High. What an amazing song. They wrote it as they were flying to or from the United Kingdom when they were touring. There's very much an influence by John Coltrane there. If you listen to the guitar bit and you know John Coltrane's playing, you'll definitely hear John Coltrane influence, which is really bizarre. Of course, when I was, 14 when this album came out, 13 even maybe, I did not know who John Coltrane was, and I did not know that till many years later. It's a short album, but it's a perfect album for the most part. And one might say the final song, 242 Foxtrot, the Learjet song, is a throwaway at 2 minutes, 8 seconds, because it's really a sound effects with a repetitive, just repetitive folk rock psychedelia to it, with sound effects of a rocket blasting off and radio communications. But it ends a perfect album at a perfect time. And I love how the four Byrds here are sitting on a carpet. Unfortunately, Gene Clark leaves the band just as this album commences. But this is an amazing record on that, almost like the flying carpet. Fifth Dimension, the Byrds flying away. One of the best albums in my collection, my favorite album of all time. If you've seen my top 10 Dylan video, you know my favorite Dylan album is Blonde on Blonde, and it continues. Highway 61, of course, Like a Rolling Stone, probably the best single of the 1960s, one of the greatest records of the 1960s, but this is the one. I mean, not just because it's a double album and there's more music, but it's an amazing record. I've been hearing lately people mention that they love this record, but Rainy Day Woman opening up 12 and 35, Everyone Must Get Stoned wrecks it for them. They don't like the way that record starts. That to me sets a tone, and then the record goes in a completely different direction. This is such a killer record. Visions of Johanna. Dylan's vocal style, we all know, has changed. It almost like every 2 or 3 records, it changes and evolves, and to the betterment for some and to the detriment to others, depending on where you come in and where you leave, and what you like. But Visions of Johanna, the vocals on there, and I Want You. I remember at the time this came out, I Want You was the song that there's a certain just rhythm to it and vocal pattern to it that I just loved. I just believed that he wanted someone, not me, but someone. Leopard skin pillbox hat, Just Like a Woman, again, one of the most beautiful songs Dylan's ever written. Most Likely You Go Your Way, I Go Mine. On and on and on and on. Absolutely Sweet Marie has got this kind of circus quality, this driving, repetitive rhythm to it that it's a fantastic record. And, like the great double albums of Stevie Wonder or the Beatles or Jimi Hendrix, there's so much to digest in Blonde on Blonde. And of course it ends on side 4 with a song that takes up the entire side, Sad-Eyed Lady of the Lowlands, with the Arabian drums. Oh God, that song could go on for hours and I would eat it up. Bob Dylan's Blonde on Blonde, one of my favorite albums of all time. If you watch me a lot, you know I'm a big fan of melody and harmonies, and I have to include this album because I adore this record. 1968's Bookends, to me this is the best Simon & Garfunkel record. This is that perfect point in their career. Obviously, Bridge Over Troubled Waters was their big breakout even beyond this, but there's a certain sound to this. There's a folk, pop, a little touch of post-psychedelic in here. Not much, but in terms of the Bookends theme into Save the Life of My Child. And for years, I never heard that little interlude in the middle of it where you hear this ethereal voice, Hello Darkness, My Old Friend, where they revisit an older song, and it's added to that little phase section on this record. America, Overs, Bookends theme, the great acoustic guitar playing. One of the, talk about underrated guitar player, Paul Simon's playing. He just has a way of his finger picking and his acoustic stylings, and of course the vocals of Art and Paul the harmonies, the beautifulness. Of course, Mrs. Robinson came out of a song written for The Graduate, and the acoustic guitar, the way that song starts with the acoustic guitar and that rhythm section, I believe the Wrecking Crew really backs them up on this record. And Hazy Shade of Winter, of course, a great single. A lot of great singles on here, even if they weren't top of the charts. At the Zoo as well. I said Mrs. Robinson and Hazy Shade of Winter. Those three especially. I love this great, simple black and white photograph by photographer Richard Avedon. And again, it's a perfect record and one of my all-time favorite records, a top 10 record in my collection. A top 10 record in my collection. And finally, you know I have to show a Beatle record, and it's got to be Revolver. I think this is my favorite Beatle album of all time. You get moods with the Beatles. Sometimes you're into the White Album. I know a lot of people like to gravitate to Abbey Road, and that's not even in my top three. I love Abbey Road, but it's not a top three record. It's their best sounding record, but it's not a top three for him. But it's a fantastic record. I won't diss any Beatle record. Some say, oh, Yellow Submarine, it kind of brings it down. This is the UK, obviously, the way the Beatles intended this record to be. Opens up with that great Harrison protest song, Taxman. You know, what an amazing song. And I love that the Beatles let Harrison open up a record here with that. And that a Harrison Penn song has Paul McCartney playing an amazing lead guitar, playing what instead of the lead guitarist in the band playing. Eleanor Rigby with the string section. You can't knock that. I'm Only Sleeping. This is where this psychedelic thing was happening. Again, as I said earlier, this and Rubber Soul are in a way companion records, late 1965 into mid 1966. Great Klaus Vormann cover. The first time in several years they didn't use the photographer Robert Freeman, although some of his photographs are cut out and pasted within here. Great Robert Whitaker photograph on the back, who photographed them in the Butcher shot, the Butcher cover shot. Every song on here, Here, There, and Everywhere, Love You Too, the Harrison song, She Said, again from a lyric from the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Good Day Sunshine's a very soulful song. I always loved Angry Bird Can Sing, and of course, us Americans got 4 of these songs early on Yesterday and Today, which, looking back on it, it's too bad because it kind of sucked out some of this John Lennon greatness from the Revolver we got in the summer of 1966. The American version doesn't cut it. I always say I think the American Revolver has an edge over the UK, not what the Beatles intended. But this record it's such a groundbreaking record. And I've talked about this before. It's hard to imagine now. You know, some people say, oh, all the Beatles, I'm tired of the friggin' Beatles. I get that. It's been, 50 plus years since they split up. But those of you of a certain age who weren't there at the time can't even imagine what this music was like at the time. When these records came out, all of their records for the most part, Revolver, Rubber Soul, Sgt. Pepper, when those 3 records came out in a year and a half period or so, 2-year period, there was nothing like that. They weren't mimicking anyone. Yes, they were influenced by other artists, but it was so different, so unique. And as a young person, as a 13, 14-year-old, when these records came out, I was in awe of these records. I just ate it all up. And it's sort of a wonderful feeling that after 55, 56 years, I can still enjoy a record like this and think and know how great it is. My top 10 records of all time. The Impossible video that next year, in 6 months, next week, will probably shift somewhat. Thanks for watching. Mazzy loves you.